Sup, freaks? It's your boy Marty here to introduce this incredible rip of TFTC. I sat down with Paolo Ardoino from Bitfinex, Tether, Holepunch, Keet. Incredible conversation. I'm very happy that Paolo and the Bitfinex and Tether and Holepunch team is beginning to speak more publicly about what they're building, because they're pretty cypherpunk. They're pretty badass. We dive in to everything in regards to Tether, the FUD around it, how the treasury is managed, how Tether's created, what it's done for people in the emerging world, how they've integrated Lightning, what their plans are with Holepunch. Hardcore cypherpunks. This was brought to you by our good friends at Unchained Capital. They're right down the hall. I'm pointing to their offices. I have a nice hole in my shirt. Unchained just launched a trading desk. This is the best way to buy Bitcoin by far. You set up a 2 or 3 multi-sig vault, and then you buy Bitcoin directly from their trading desk into your vault. It doesn't sit on an exchange. You don't have to get your wallets and produce an address and do all that stuff. You set up your vault, you buy Bitcoin via Unchained's trading desk, and it goes straight to your cold storage, your multi-sig cold storage. It's a beautiful thing. Best way to buy Bitcoin. I've done it. It's easy. They made it very easy. Right now, it's only available in 31 states. So if you are interested in leveraging the trading desk, just check to make sure your state is on the list of 31 states that it's available in. They're working on 50 states. Hope to have all 50 states soon. Buy Bitcoin straight to cold storage. Use Unchained trading desk at unchained.com/trading to check this out. If you're a high net worth individual, if you're a business, if you're medium worth, lower end of the economic ladder, and you want to buy Bitcoin, this is the most secure way to do it. You buy it, go straight to cold storage. Unchained.com/trading. This rip was also brought to you by our good friends at Brains. The people on YouTube don't like these ads. I'm sorry. We're gonna have a different ad structure on YouTube soon, but Brains sponsored this show. God, do we love them. If you're a miner, you need to be leveraging Brains. They have Brains Pool, formerly Slush Pool. They have Brains OS Plus firmware, which idiot-proofs your mining operation. If you have an ASIC that's compatible with Brains OS Plus firmware and you're not running it, you're an idiot. Go download Brains OS Plus firmware to make sure that you're stacking as many sats as possible and helping to elongate the life cycle of your ASIC. They have Brains Insights, which is a massive, incredible dashboard with all the data that you'll need, calculators that you'll need for your mining operation. And then they have their blog and some books. I wrote the foreword to a book with Daniel Frumkin from Brains, the Bitcoin Mining Handbook. Go pick that up as well. Go to brains.com to check out all this, BRAIINS.com. This rip was also brought to you by our good friends at Upstream Data. Upstream Data is here to bring you all the mining stuff that you need. Whether you're an upstream oil and gas producer looking to leverage your excess natural gas, they're building the hash huts for you. They have a 50 kilowatt hash hut, of which I am the owner of not one. I've got many of them now, and they're beast. It comes with the data center, the generator, which is very important. These generators are purpose built for Bitcoin mining. And then if you need the ASICs as well, Upstream does some ASIC brokerage, so you can get it all in one package. If you're looking to leverage your excess resources, whether it be upstream at the well pad, or if you're a utility company with some excess electricity, some capacity, Upstream is here to build the infrastructure that you need. Go to upstreamdata.ca, tell them the TFTC sent you. And they also, if you're an at-home miner, they have their black box, which allows you to put some ASICs in it. You shut the box and all the sound, not all of it, but a considerable amount of the sound goes away. You don't have the annoying loud ASIC ring throughout your house. You can save your marriage. Go buy a black box. And again, you can buy a black box, use the code FREAKS, FREAKS. You're going to get 5% off. If you want to do a bundle, you can get a black box and ASICs. They'll hook that up. Go to shop.upstreamdata.ca to check that out. Last but not least, this was brought to you by our good friends at Hodl Hodl. Hodl Hodl is here to bring you a peer-to-peer lending platform with no KYC, no AML. It's peer-to-peer. Relatively low rates in the lending market compared to other lenders. And then on top of that, it leverages Bitcoin's multi-sig properties as well. What you do is you put your Bitcoin up in a 2 or 3 multi-sig escrow account. You hold one key, your counterparty in the loan holds one key, and then hodl holds the third key. And so your Bitcoin's locked up as collateral in that escrow multi-sig wallet. You can't move the Bitcoin, obviously, since you only have one key in that 2 or 3 quorum. However, since you have one key, you have visibility into the escrow account so that you know your sats aren't being rehypothecated. And if you're paying back your loan, your stablecoin loan, you're going to get your sats back at the end of the day. Put sats up in collateral, get stablecoins in return, pay back the loan, get your sats back. Simple as that. On the other end, if you want to lend out stablecoins that you have sitting around, you put them up in the marketplace, lend them out to somebody using Bitcoin as collateral. They pay you back what you gave them plus interest. It's a beautiful thing. Lend.hodlhodl.com. No KYC, no AML, peer-to-peer, leverages multi-sig, and lower rates. Lend.hodlhodl.com. Enjoy this episode with Paolo. It's a good one. Okay.
You've had a dynamic where money's become freer than free.
If you talk about a Fed just gone nuts, all the central banks going nuts.
So it's all acting like safe haven.
I believe that in a world where central bankers are tripping over themselves to devalue their currency, Bitcoin wins. In the world of fiat currencies, Bitcoin is the victor.
I mean, that's part of the bull case for Bitcoin.
If you're not paying attention, you probably should be.
Paolo, thank you for joining us while you're in the middle of a conference.
Thank you, Marty, for having me.
Well, I'm very excited. I mean, on TFTC, on this show, on Rabbit Hole Recap that I do with Matt Odell, we've talked for many years about Bitfinex, Tether, and more recently we started talking about Keet. You are the CTO of Bitfinex and Tether and the Chief Strategy Officer of Keet?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, and I didn't know you were at a conference. You're at a regulatory conference. It's got to be it's got to be exciting for you.
Look, I think that is definitely, we are hearing about, these MiCA license developments. So it's clear that the world is going towards a more regulated area for both exchanges and stable coins. So that's where we stand at, right? So we need to be part of the, discussions, because Tether represents the biggest stablecoin, and we have been asked many questions. So they want to hear directly from us. They want to understand how Tether is being used, and I think that is quite interesting to me. The thing that I'm more excited to talk about in this type of conferences is sometimes living in Europe, and maybe also you might share the feeling also living in the US, but we hear a lot of people tending to think about the use, how much a technology or a tool or a product is useful based on their personal experience, and that's it, right? But they don't understand that there is an entire world out there that might see things differently, right? The same thing applies to Bitcoin. But with Tether, and Bitcoin, I've been advocating a lot in Europe because I see a lot of closed minds here, and I hear a lot of closed minds here that don't understand that, if you look at Turkey, if you look at Argentina, Venezuela, El Salvador, and Vietnam, and so many places in Africa, so many places are actually in desperate need of these technologies and this new type of money. And, they are not used to have perfect banking rails, if you could call them, although, perfect and banking should not be in the same sentence anyway. But, it's my role is trying to, be the spokesperson for the industry, at least with hopefully I'm representing the good part of the ethos of the industry, trying to make lawmakers understanding where we are coming from and why what we are doing is so important.
Yeah, and if things keep going the way they have been going the last week, the people of England might need Bitcoin and Tether for banking purposes as well. But I think for the context of this conversation, for anybody who's new to the show, I mean, Bitfinex, you guys and Tether have been around for quite some time. And like I mentioned, you guys have drawn the ire of regulators around the world, particularly from here in the US and in New York State, and the NY. what is it, the NYSFD, whatever it is, has come at you guys. Why don't we talk a little bit about the history of Bitfinex and Tether and how you guys are set up from a regulatory framework and how many customers you guys serve around the world?
Yeah, so, well, Bitfinex started in 2012 and Tether started in 2014. Well, when both companies started, there was not much law around cryptocurrencies and stablecoins, even source stablecoins, right? Stablecoins were actually created with Tether. That was the first one.
On Omni, correct?
And that's correct. So Omni was first called Mastercoin, was the let's say the base layer for Tether, and that allowed it to grow pretty quickly. Until then, Ethereum was added as support to Ethereum was added in the end of 2017. But with the big ICO boom, we had in 2016 Poloniex heavily starting to rely on Tether because and then created massive arbitrage opportunity between tethered enabled exchanges, because then in order to move fiat from one exchange to another, you would take 35 days. The arbitrage opportunity was completely gone, was extremely capital intensive. But Tether completely streamlined that process, allowing USDT, so dollars, moving at the same pace on chain as Bitcoin, right? Especially using Bitcoin blockchain. So now exchanges usually credit Bitcoin within one block or three blocks, and they could do the same thing with Tether. So for the first time, basically in history, dollars could move at really high, fast pace rather than waiting for international wires to settle. So that moment drew a lot of attention to Tether, especially at the end of 2017, beginning of 2018. Tether became the first big, the first big stablecoin to bypass $1 billion in market cap, and grew pretty quickly over 2018 to reach around 4 billion. At that time, really openly, we discussed that a few times. We had some issues with banking. Banking was, with the ISO boom, banks became really, really well aware of crypto. They were extremely scared of crypto. And so they started shutting down bank accounts all over the place, especially, for exchanges and stable coins issues, where there were basically only us that were that big. So that was a challenging moment, but as we are used to in both Bitfinex and Tether, we keep our head down, we keep working. Think again openly, we really should have done a much better job in PR, in making our community, the general Bitcoin community, crypto community at large, to understand what the hell was going on. We actually have been always shy to communicate with public, and we come from the fact that we are all simple guys, all like people that love to work and keep their head down, but we realize that we are big companies and we should so now we realize, right, so in 2020, 21, we started realizing that we were actually really, really big companies, and we should act more publicly in the interest of both our customers and wannabe customers, or anyway the community at large. So we started improving communication. You might see that changing a lot. So that has changed a lot in the last 2 years or so. We hired important person in the sector to help us to draft correctly our communication and explain that this industry is extremely challenging, right? So I compare it to when the first cars were built, and there were no streets, and there was no manual on how to drive safely, and there were no legal framework for operating a car and making sure that you wouldn't start, or you wouldn't be a problem for society, right? So it's the crypto industry is like that, right? So we are learning while we go, and there were no rules. There are new rules are coming up now, kind of. Now also the US and Europe are starting to draft laws, and that's something that is going to heavily change the industry, I think, in the next few years. So we need to act at like big guys, I would say. So when I joined, crypto was basically exchanges felt like e-commerces for bitcoins rather than trading platforms, right? So you could handle 10 orders per second if you were lucky. Now we are talking about hundreds of thousands of orders per second that are processed through matching engines in a single exchange. Imagine across all the exchanges. So the level of complexity of what we are doing, the size of the companies, they are ballooning, and so that requires a pure structure. So we have been, to summarize, we have been always technologies focusing first on the product and safety of our companies, and then on communication. But we should have taken communication a bit more, let's say, as part of our full strategy or at the beginning.
Yeah, and like I said, you guys have drawn the ire of not only regulators, but I hate the word conspiracy theory because I think it's a bastardized phrase, but theorists out there who believe that Tether is just creating the synthetic dollar market out of thin air in the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency space, and really driving prices. I mean, that's one of the big themes out there in TradFi is we're not going to go near Bitcoin or quote unquote crypto because Tether exists and it's just manipulating prices. I mean, I've been following Tether for many years now. I'm on. I think I understand how these Tether are created, but I'd like to hear it from are you guys just spinning up dollars out of the ether, putting them on these blockchains, and then driving prices? What is the mechanism that actually brings Tether to the market, a Tether token?
Well, there is so much to talk about that. Of course, there is no way that Tether creates USDT out of thin air, right? So first of all, we have now a really big auditor that performs our attestation. Our attestation, by the way, we have been heavily scrutinized by two big regulators in the US. And by the way, all our operations and documentation is still going to the New York Attorney General on a quarterly basis, right? It's not like, you snap a finger and you create money. That's not how Tether works and ever worked. So the Tether mechanism is pretty simple. A customer wants to acquire 100,000 USDT. They send $100,000 to our bank account. When the dollars are received and they are safe in the bank account, 100,000 USDT minus fees are created and sent back on chain. The opposite process is also true. Someone wants back their money. They send us to our treasury wallet on chain 100,000 USDT, and we send back a wire for the same amount minus fees. So then what happens with the money in the bank is that we are investing a portion of that money in what we call safe and liquid assets. At the moment, the history of Tether has been extremely interesting around that, because the reality of what we were doing has been from the Tether truthers has been always twisted. And in fact, we have heard about Evergrande so much time, right? These guys were suggesting that Tether was investing in and had 80% exposure to Evergrande. Tether never held any Evergrande commercial paper or such, right? So anyone that has good experience with traditional financial markets knows that you couldn't even touch Evergrande with a 10-foot pole since a long time, right? So and why the hell we should have done that, right? So the good thing about stable coins is that you can take really the least risk possible and still earn a yield on a important monetary base, right? So when you have like $50 billion in a bank account and you have like a return of 20, 30, 40 basis points, is a lot of money, right? So it's not something negligible, it's a lot of money. And so if you are able to keep the company operations lean like Tether does, then you don't need to take risk in order to generate revenues. And it's important that, of course, stablecoins generate revenues because, as you know, we have also our issuance and redemption fees that are 10 basis points, so that operating a healthy business allows us to maintain a really strong stablecoin. And you can see that you can see the strength of Tether, because Tether did something that not even a bank or no bank in the world has ever done in the last 2 to 3 months, right? So after the Luna Terra crash, the 12th, 13th of May, if I'm correct with the date, so there was an immense Tether FUD created, and that was the beginning of the Tether shorter starting to pile up, and paid trolls sharing all the most catastrophic news around Tether. But I think that I'm glad that in a way that happened, because we could prove again that we did something that no bank could do. So we were able to pay $7 billion in 2 days, right? $7 billion at that time was around 10% of our reserves. And there is, in the last 30 to 40 years, there is only one situation in which the banking industry, a bank in the banking industry had to pay out 10% of their assets, was called Washington Mutual in 2008, and that went bankrupt. And Tether did that in 2 days without a blink of an eye. And then in over 1 month, Tether was able to process around $20 billion. That was around 25% of its reserves. And we could have done much more than that. Well, the market stopped, and now Tether started growing again. And our main competitor started to decrease widely. But it's something that, in the end, yes, we have now the biggest auditing firm doing attestation among the other stable coins. We are providing our information to the AG still and all that, right? But there is no one else that has this real world scenario that proves the risk management that we in fact had, right? We always said we have liquid assets, we have the best risk management in the world. And I can tell you one more. Sorry if I'm rambling so much, but and another interesting factor is that it was discovered that Tether is actually one of the few companies that takes risk management really seriously, right? So we had a lending program, and we were kind of the only company, if not one of really, really few companies, that was over collateralizing its loans, right? So we had between 130% to 150% collateral, so that even when something hit the fan, we could completely unwind this position, but even in a having some equity left to return to the borrower. So that speaks really highly about the quality of our risk management, because we didn't wait, we handled it, I would say, perfectly. Always in touch with the customer. The customer in this situation was Celsius, and instead we heard many companies that were considered heroes, right? Were considered mighty, perfect, without any issues, all part of this group of holy heroes of the industry, and they were all doing uncollateralized loans. So it's interesting to me that while during the second half of May, all these journals, newspapers were all looking at Tether, right? And they were all waiting for Tether to do something wrong or stupid, right? They were so focalized on Tether that they couldn't see that probably the actual issue of the industry, of the crypto industry, was under their eyes. Also, in some companies that were even public companies, right? So we are seeing some public companies that went bankrupt and filed Chapter 11 because they were doing uncollateralized loans. So the interesting fact in the aftermath is that Tether probably was not the bad guy all along, and we should have focused somewhere else our attention.
Yeah. No, it was a massive stress test for the whole industry. And like you said, the fact that you guys were able to move $7 billion in 2 days is extremely impressive. And that gets to another question too. I mean, well, first, like the risk management, like you just described in the industry, was proven to be extremely subpar, particularly when it comes to the collateralization of the loans that were going out from many of these businesses. Many blowups happen, but another sort of theme and topic around that time, which I'm very interested to get your thoughts on, is the difference between a fully reserved dollar to dollar or equivalent paper instrument to dollar stablecoin like Tether versus these programmatic stablecoins like MakerDAO or Terra Luna, which was one of those. What are your thoughts on the differences between the two models of stablecoin and the risk involved with both?
So I was in Paris again, actually in April, and at the blockchain week in Paris, and I was talking to. That was the moment when Terra and Luna were at their peak, and Terra was considered this new beautiful instrument by the community, many people, influential people in the crypto community, and I was asked by journalists what were my thoughts on Terra. And I said, look, to me, is a disaster waiting to happen because so you cannot have a stable coin that is collateralized by another thing that the same guy created, basically, right? So Luna was collateralizing Terra because, yes, there were some Bitcoin, but the majority was actually linked to Terra and the Anchor protocol and so on. So to me, when I said that, I was, many people were upset and said, well, you are just jealous because Terra is going to eat your lunch at Tether. And I said, well, it's easy to be a stable coin until you are small because you can grow. And worst case scenario, if you have to handle liquidation in the market can sustain a $2 billion, $3 billion liquidation. Is still possible in a market with good liquidity. But if you are an $18 billion that was Terra at its peak before everything started to crumble, then it's too much because you might need to liquidate half of your position. That is $10 billion, right? So there is too much for $10 billion in an already stressed market is too much, right? So that was easy. The more you grow, the more you have to make sure that all your backing are extremely solid and liquid, right? So, and their backing was Luna and was Bitcoin. So it was kind of easy for people to borrow Luna, short Luna, sub in order to start triggering liquidations and force the Terra Foundation to have to sell again Luna to stable coins in order to try to protect their peg. And you enter in this vortex, in this cascading loop that will make, the more people sell Luna, the Terra Foundation had to sell Luna, and then it's a race to zero. So of course Terra was in the aftermath was evident to now everyone that was extremely subject to attacks. If you think about it, it's exactly what short sellers try to do with Tether, right? They started selling Tether subpar, and they tried to cause a potential bank run, right? They said, okay, what happens if you think about the financial aspects of and the operativity, right? So if you sell Tether, let's say 50 basis points below the dollar, what happens is that market makers will buy these cheap tethers on exchanges, will send these cheap tethers to our platform, and will redeem for $1. They take $1, they send the dollar to the exchange again, they buy cheap tethers, and so on and so forth. And this is how the 7 billion and then eventually 20 billion in redemptions happen, right? So there is this enormous pressure, and you are, as a stable coin, you are forced to do your job, right? That is giving back the money, but in a really short amount of time. And so the hope of short sellers was that, in fact, we didn't have all the reserves that we said that we had. We didn't have the security, the liquidity that we said we had, right? So, well, they got their proof now. But that if in fact we weren't so solid, a stable coin that doesn't have liquid assets would have the same issue of Terra. So again, I'm glad that we were able to prove that, not just with some paper that says that in fact we are solid, but with actual facts.
Yeah, with actual market activity. Yeah, again, and it's interesting. There's I've had people on this podcast again who are tradfi and are Bitcoin curious, but they stay out of the market because they're worried about tether manipulation, and it's always befuddled me, and I've always fallen short of being able to convince them, like, hey, it seems like it's fully reserved. They've proven via audits that it's reserved, and they had this massive stress test over the summer. I don't know what else to tell these people. What would you tell these people that are staying out of Bitcoin because they think tether manipulation is running the market?
I mean, I think that the sad part is that thinking that Bitcoin has only value because Tether is extremely sad to me, right? So Bitcoin is this instrument that is providing freedom to many, has a lot of real world use cases. It's new technology, started 10 years ago, well, a bit more now, but is 14 years ago, and is actually changing the world for many populations that need a lifeline, because well, yes, GBP is going down the bin, but if you think about Turkish lira, they lost 70% of more than 70% of the value in 12 months, right? Approaching to 80% now, and the same thing happened to the Argentinian pesos, and then Venezuela, their own currency has the same fate, and so on. So thinking that the only reason for Bitcoin to have a value is because some magic thing that's happening in behind the scenes is quite sad. And we in fact proved that all the Tethers, USDT tokens, and the other tokens are in fact backed. We again are providing this information to the AG. We have now BDO, that is a top 5 auditing firm that is performing our attestations. I mean, we are providing so much information out there that I don't even know what to tell these guys anymore, because I felt like we passed from a situation where people were saying, well, guys, you are not giving us anything, and now we're giving so much information. And also even the commercial papers are not, I didn't mention, but the commercial papers were this thing that we published in 2021, right, with the first attestation we did. We published the fact that we have commercial papers, and so we our portfolio was composed around 30 billion in commercial papers back in June 2021. And the first thing that I can say is that commercial papers that we had were the vast majority was rated A1 and A2 from Standard & Poor's, right? So extremely liquid, extremely safe, right? So then yet many people didn't know what commercial papers were, right? So they were scared that there were something like, some numbers written on the back of an envelope of a focaccia or a pizza, right? That is not actual what our commercial papers are. But yet, anyway, we took the decision publicly to unwind our commercial paper position and move that part completely in U.S. Treasuries. So what happened in the last 10 to 12 months is that At the end of August, we had still, this August, we were able to unwind 30 billion of commercial papers, and we had left only 200 million. And by the end of October, we'll have zero. So that is also proof that what we said about the liquidity of our commercial paper was in fact correct. And so we didn't lose any money. We just let them expire. We didn't lose any money on the commercial paper. Actually, we made interest on these commercial papers. And that is also proven by the fact that our equity at the end of shareholder equity at the end of June was $190 million, and it will be much higher at the new attestation of in September, end of September. Of course, the interest rates are going up and so on. But is also another interesting data point is that Tether never shared a dividend, right? Issued a dividend. So all the interest, all the revenues that Tether have always generated are left in the company because we want to increase backing. And at this pace, we will have, we will reach, we will create this big war chest that will help us to further collateralize the issued tokens. And that is an additional proof of the fact that, for us, is not all about money, is actually creating something that is solid for the ecosystem, because we have a lot of long-term plans, including Holepunch and all this stuff. So we want to create solid products for the industry. And I think that overall we prove that, with all our efforts, right? We are all, after so many years, we are seeing CEOs stepping down, right? So, that are being in the space as long as us, or even much less. And yet they are stepping down while we are still here fighting and pushing for what we believe is the good part of our industry.
Yeah, and that's what I think you guys are Bitcoiners at heart, and that's how we can wrap up this Tether stablecoin part of the conversation. Is I've always viewed, so I've never used Tether. I personally don't have a use case for it. I just stack Bitcoin passively and hold Bitcoin, and I'm lucky to make money that can sustain my life, and I don't need to send it internationally. It's just my position personally, living here in the United States and where I am in my personal life.
Can I say something to that?
Sure.
Sorry if I. That is exactly right. So you wouldn't need, and most people in Europe even don't need stable coins, right? So you have the perfect US dollar banking rail, right? So Tether business plan was never take over US banking. That would be foolish of us or anyone else trying. But there is just a desperate need outside the US, right? In the emerging markets, developing countries, of US dollars. Right, they are a lifeline compared to their national currencies. So basically, that is Tether business model, right? So we don't pretend everyone using us. We just want to help people that don't have access to a bank account. So there are 2 billion people that don't have banking, and yes, I would prefer personally, and everyone in our team would prefer them to use bitcoins, right? So Bitcoin is much better than Tether, right? Tether is no Bitcoin. I always said that Tether is centralized, but the reality is that there are many people in the world that still are linked to the US dollar. They need the US dollar, they want the US dollar, and they are all in the poorest countries in the world. So that's what Tether is for.
Yeah, and it's undeniable there is utility there. If anybody's done, Matt Alborg, who's at Bitrefill, formerly ran his own research arm called Useful Tulips. He went and did in-depth research with people in Venezuela, Argentina, Nigeria, asking how they interacted with Bitcoin, and he found, just via his research of going out and actually asking people, is that people love Bitcoin as a settlement layer, and the novel utility it brought them in their lives. However, they couldn't stomach the intraday, intra-month, intra-year price volatility. So a lot of them would move part of their Bitcoin position into stablecoins, with Tether being one of the largest ones. So again, sitting here in Austin, Texas, being an American citizen who is able to enjoy the stability of the dollar just in my bank account. I don't have a use case for it, but it's undeniable that there are people in these emerging economies, like you described, that do have a use case for this, which you guys are providing. But that's again another thing that we've said on this show a lot. Like Tether is inherently unstable because it's dollar. The dollar is unstable at the end of the day in the long run. And so that's how I wanted to transition this conversation is how do you view Tether's place in a longer term thinking of Bitcoin? Do you see it as this transitionary mechanism that eventually people are using it now, but at some point in the future, Bitcoin will be more widely adopted, more liquid, much larger market cap, and you guys see it as sort of a stepping stone getting towards that hyper-Bitcoinized world?
Yeah, I think that we think that in the long term, and we hope in the long term that is part of our work. We want Bitcoin to be adopted much more widely, right? So we believe that in the next 10 years, Bitcoin installed monetary base will grow at least 10 times, if not more. And that's how Bitcoin will be also accepted and people much more by, day-to-day life people, right? So, if you are like, you have a grocery store, if you are like a bus driver and so on, you want to have stability in life, right? There is so much uncertainty and you want to have stability. But of course, the fiat currency stability, well, we are seeing now with the GBP, and we are seeing that with all the other currencies. But the dollar is still the reserve currency in the world. But stability is actually, people think that the dollar or these big stable currencies are stable, but actually there is an intrinsic cost in holding them, that is the inflation and so on, right? So people are kind of making fun of Bitcoin detractors are making fun of Bitcoin because Bitcoin is still moving like the US stocks, or Bitcoin is not an inflation hedge. But I always make the comparison, as I did, for example, for the El Salvador Bitcoin adoption, that people like, it's unfair to expect that Bitcoin would be a replacement for all the currencies within just 14 years from its birth. As is for El Salvador, it's maybe 2 to 5% the actual adoption of Bitcoin in El Salvador, probably a little bit more now. But it's like pretending that after the first year, or even 14 years of the first car was produced by Ford, everyone in the US would have a car, right? Back then, in the first years of the first cars being produced, you would have bankers and lawyers, everyone making fun of who was driving on a car, saying, and they were, you had all these newspapers with titles like, the cars will never replace horses. Horses are much more sustainable and clean way of moving around, much faster, and so on, right? So things take time, right? So pretending that innovation can happen from one day to another is like, even internet took a lot of time to grow behind the scenes to get where we are at, right? So it's I think that in the long term, just to answer your question, in the long term, I'm seeing people pricing their services in Bitcoin. That's what we need, right? Thinking first in Bitcoin terms rather than in dollar terms, because if you keep doing the conversion, and if your mental based currency is dollar, of course Tether will still be needed. But if in the future we're seeing more and more people actually thinking in Bitcoin terms, then that will be the game changer. So we are not biased. It's not like we are hoping that things stay the same. We think that the utility of Tether is just being a mere servant of Bitcoin, and it's finding these use cases around the world. But maybe eventually these use cases will disappear because just people will price everything in Bitcoin directly, and that would be probably a safer future to live in.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. It's going to take time. Yeah, the people who think that you're going to get mass adoption immediately are completely delusional. This is going to take time. It has taken time. Like you mentioned, we're almost 14 years in. Everybody's anchoring to like, yeah, we're a decade in, but we're almost a decade and a half into this now as we move forward through time. And that's what's really exciting to see. So like you mentioned Holepunch and Keet, so you guys are expanding the offering of products. And I really think what you guys are building on Holepunch, like Keet being one of those first products, is very interesting because you guys are an exchange and a stablecoin company, and getting into end-to-end encrypted messaging. Many people wouldn't think that would be your next foray into your product suite. So very interested to hear your plans with Holepunch and Keet specifically, and why you guys decided to build those products. Why was that the next product in your suite?
So interesting enough, Holepunch and Keet is in development since 4 to 5 years, right? So myself, I'm a developer since all my life, and I've been always excited by peer-to-peer technology, right? So and privacy. So my first public project was called Kernel Socks Bouncer. Was a project that would allow you to create modify Linux and in order to pipe all your connections through SOCKS 5 and proxies, so that everything was inherently private in your Linux ecosystem, right? Completely transparent to all your applications. And then I worked a lot in distributed technologies. I've been one of the coolest projects I ever contributed to was a research project for the university that was actually paid by a government that wanted to have this massive and super reliable communication system for battlefields. I worked a lot on that for 2 to 3 years before moving to finance, and so always been excited by modularization, microservices, peer-to-peer, decentralized applications, and so on. And so when I started to work a lot in Bitfinex and Tether and see the potential of Bitcoin as a technology, as a currency, and as a technology, I think that Bitcoin is dual, right? There is the blockchain, and then there is the currency. So I started thinking, okay, but this there is much more to freedom needs. I come from, and sorry if I jump back and forth, I come from this all the movement of Stallman, with the Free Software Foundation. I always followed that. All the books of like the Cathedral and Bazaar that teach you how to think about software, right? Software, like you can think about Microsoft and Windows as this cathedral that is in a way super complex and till a certain extent beautiful to the external eyes, but is extremely, if you touch anything, it will fall down, right? It's like actually is a cathedral mask, is a castle of cards, but a mask as a cathedral. And on the other side, you had bazaars that are these thing that can keep changing shape and is being destroyed and rebuilt over the centuries. And that's how you should build software, right? Software should be always built as something that is extremely modular, simple, does one simple thing, and can change shape immediately without having to restructure it heavily. That's how we think about microservices. And one of the things that I brought to Bitfinex was that Bitfinex, when I joined in 2014, was one single project on GitHub, one single modular one single monolithic piece of code. And then, fast forward many years, now we have more than 500 to almost 600 projects on GitHub. Everyone is basically a simple module, a microservice that interact with each other on a distributed hash table, internal private distributed hash table. So now it's, people are looking at, during the craziest moment of volatility, they're looking at Bitfinex as the exchange that is always up, right? Because it's built with actually we are doing our internal private peer-to-peer network in order to make our platform resistant. So a few years ago, I started talking a lot with another open source developer called Matthias Bus. He's a great developer. He shared a passion about peer-to-peer technology with me, and we started, chatting and thinking how we could, if we could build and use basically BitTorrent as a base layer for many more things than what we were seeing BitTorrent used for, right? BitTorrent is a great technology, has opened the eyes of many people when it comes to technology, because it is the only unstoppable way to share files, right? So before BitTorrent, I'm not sure if you recall that, but there were many other solutions like LimeWire, like eDonkey without Kademlia, and all these other solutions like Gnutella and so on, but they were always shut down. And then BitTorrent came, right? So the actual realization back then was but BitTorrent is great, but is limited to static files. What if we take that technology, we improve it, BitTorrent is basically composed by three things: distributed hash table, swarming. So the distributed hash table is basically a data structure that is distributed among different peers, different computers, up to 10 millions. And helps to store the information, the indexes of all the content that is available on BitTorrent among all these peers. So you don't have a centralized index that says, okay, all these computers has all these files, but this information is kept, distributed, decentralized across all these peers through the distributed hash table data structure. The second cool thing about BitTorrent was swarming. Swarming means that the more people were downloading or had a file on their computer, the faster it was getting for others to download it. Simple as that, right? And the third thing was hole punching. So one of the cool things about BitTorrent is that if you remember Gnutella or LimeWire, you had to, in order to speed up the download, you had to go on your and upload and service files. You had to go on your router at home, tweak the port, open the port publicly, and route that to your own computer. I mean, that is something that normal people that are not techie, they cannot do. But BitTorrent started to introduce hole punching. That is that thing that allowed two peers to establish a direct connection without a central server. And that is the actual most important technology that we're using in Holepunch. That is the name of the company and the main framework, because that is actually removing the need of central servers for many use cases. And so basically, finishing my thoughts, we decided that, BitTorrent is cool, but it's for static files. What if we could expand the use case to actual, live streams, right? Everything in internet is live stream. So what we are doing now, this podcast, is creating a video, audio live streams, and so on, right? So browsing is a live stream, using applications, and everything is live stream. So what if we could reuse the same technology for everything that is not just static files? And that's how Holepunch was born. And so in order to demonstrate to the world that the potential of this technology, we wanted to create a simple use case, right? So everyone is used to Zoom or to Google Meet. What if we could recreate the very same thing without any single central server? That is the most important thing for me, because we live in a world where we could actually get to Mars pretty soon, and yet we have this thing where people think that in order for you and me to communicate, to have a voice or video chat, we need to pass through someone else's server. Why should it be like that, right? So the technology is good enough so that our two computers can communicate directly without have to proxy our data through another person server. So in general, right, so we are used to use a lot the scam keyword in our industry, but I think that cloud is the ultimate scam, right? Is a big problem, and the more there is the geopolitical turmoil, we are going to see it as a problem, right? So we are used to store all our information on someone else's servers, and not now. So all these big tech companies are harvesting our data, and that is, I think, a pretty obvious thing for me to say. But I want to make people reason on the fact that there is a big problem now with also in Europe, if they think about GDPR. That is an interesting law that force governments, or that assumes that governments, public administration, and private companies in a certain country won't share automatically information of citizens outside of the country boundaries, or store that information on data centers in other countries. If you think about it, makes sense, right? So I'm Italian, and why public administration information should data that is my data as a citizen should be stored on cloud somewhere else, right? And that is for public administration. But think about all the private information, photos, how much content every single person in a specific country creates daily. And yet all that information is stored on foreign data centers. And things were okay-ish until the last year, but things are starting to turn. And what if we are going to, and God forbids, but what if we are going towards a much more difficult times in terms of war and such, right? So we are going to see this data being weaponized, not between people and people, but between countries. And that is extremely scary, right? So a country that suddenly has a data center on its soil can say, okay, I will seize that all this information from this big tech company. I will use it against someone else, right? That is, I think, quite, I understand that is too much Orwellian for many, but I don't like to live in an uncertainty when it comes to my data and how my data will be used, right? Because these big tech companies are definitely has pushed people to think that cloud was this friendly help, right? Like this, with Windows, we had back in time, we had the clipboard, like that smiley face in the Google in Microsoft Word, right? But it's like computers and so softwares that are cloud softwares or running on our computers are not our friends. They are doing whatever they can. They look like our friends. They help us to save, to back up our data and so on. But the ultimate goal is to get control over our data. So we have to think twice on what we want to see in the future when it comes to data storage and our storage. So long story short, with Keet, we wanted to prove that all this cloud infrastructure is useless. And we wanted to do it providing a software that could provide much better, higher quality video and audio calls to its users. Because if you don't route your traffic, if you don't proxy your traffic through someone else's data center, then you don't have to compress that much your traffic, right? So my traffic, my video can go from my computer to your computer directly, right? And the interesting thing is that these people they tend to think that mobile phones are not powerful enough to do certain things, and so that's why we need cloud. We need to use Zoom needs data centers because somehow they add this additional magic to connectivity. That is not true. So mobile phones are extremely powerful. They are more powerful probably than my computer. They can do many things. They have a lot of storage, and they can interact with the network peers that subsidize what they are missing, right? So that's the beauty of it, right? Even more important fact is that the entire combination, so all the mobile devices, computers, Raspberries, desktops combined in the world, and also internet connections in the world are much more powerful than all the data centers available in the world, right? So we don't need data centers because our data center can be internet. And I'm not talking about some magic global state internet like Filecoin and stuff, right? So it's an internet where peers are just talking with the peers that they want to talk to, they need to talk to, right? So it's like complete decentralization as the Web 1 was supposed to be when it was born.
Yeah. No, going back to your point, like, I myself, as somebody who runs a website, runs a podcast, I've been told I need to host those files in the cloud on somebody else's server because I myself don't have the bandwidth in my hardware to do that. And so, are you saying, like, via Holepunch and these peer-to-peer connections that and just proving that that may not be true?
Yes, let me let me elaborate your exact example, right? So, and that's how and why Holepunch is super powerful. Remember that BitTorrent has this technology called swarming, right? So the more people were downloading a file, the faster it was getting. So imagine that you are now hosting your live show on your Raspberry Pi, and at home you have like a good line, but is an average line anyway, right? Of course, if you have 10 million viewers, it's obvious that your computer will never be able to offer the live show to everyone at the same time. But what if, right? But the good thing about live streams, if there is a little bit of latency, right? 200 milliseconds, 500 milliseconds, no one will care, right? So if I see your live stream, it's not we are on a call, right? So if I see it as a live stream, I can afford even 1 second latency. So what if we use the swarming technology and say that, you start streaming, but the more people are the first people that are subscribed, right? So the more people are subscribed, they download chunk of the data from you, right? And they are advertising to the rest of the network, look, I have these chunks, and so on. So suddenly they start resharing the data themselves. So you can do live streams to tens of millions of people in parallel without any central server with swarming. And that is not like some hypothetical technology. That was proven by BitTorrent. So we are just taking that, improving it, and making it available for live streams. So we are going to also prove that, the YouTube use case, people can do YouTube, OnlyFans, everything that is available now at home with their own bandwidth.
This would be massive. And like you said, the
Yes.
the Orwellian state is beginning to encroach more and more. I mean, I can only imagine the attacks that are going to be levied after the Nord Stream pipeline was bombed yesterday. I think it'd be naive not to think that critical internet infrastructure will draw the attention of these nation states next. And it seems like that's the position we've been thrust in as a global society, is all these nation states are warring against each other, and you have these very hyper-centralized critical infrastructure, mainly internet infrastructure, that's sitting out there like a sitting duck, and we're tasked with this goal of basically creating alternatives to that before it gets completely corrupted by these warring nations. So how do you see Holepunch playing out through here? So I know Bitfinex or Tether's backing, Synonym, John Carvalho and team. They're leveraging some of this technology as well. That's a first to market team there leveraging this. You guys are building Keet. What has the reception to Holepunch been since people started playing around with it?
So far we had around 100,000 downloads. That for being a 2-month product, and it is a lot to me. There is no mobile version yet. I cannot wait for the mobile version because I think it will grow massively. So the technology, I think, is exciting many. We are seeing a ton of people asking when they can get access to the SDK. The beauty of Keet and Holepunch is that will be fully open source, right? So there is a reason why it's not open source yet, is that as many times happen in our industry, you release something, it gets cloned immediately, and an altcoin gets put on top of it as a way to pay for the network. And I've been a heavy advocate of the fact that we don't need other tokens, right? So protocols. So in Web3 or DeFi, there was this narrative that was telling everyone a protocol cannot exist without a token. And one of the main drivers, are actually what we wanted to do with Holepunch, was myself, Matthias, we were always pushing for showing that the protocol can be massive without having a token, because we need to go back to the good old times when a product was used because it had utility rather than being used because someone was making money out of it, right? So the beauty of Keet and Holepunch is that they will be all fully open source. Everyone will be able to take it, right, and build whatever. So Holepunch will have a set of primitives for decentralized storage, data relaying. You can build VPNs, you can build search engines on that. You can build file storage. One of the applications that is most exciting for me is like, imagine that all your digital life, right? You can store it among peers with some sort of redundancy, and you pay like some fraction of Bitcoin monthly in order to keep that safe and backed up, right? And then you go around, you travel, you cross countries, and you arrive somewhere, you buy a new laptop, and you have just to remember 24 words that are basically deriving your Holepunch master key, and that will allow you to get back all your data from the peers, right? So your personal digital life can be as stored, as safe, as decentralized, as secured in a decentralized form as your Bitcoins. So the fact that is super cool, right? And you can, with this technology, you can have a slider that can allow you to go back in history and go forward, and you can see the changes of your history, because this decentralized data structure are extremely powerful to also have indexes, time-based indexes, and so on. So I don't want to bother you with all this stuff, but I'm just getting excited for all the things that we can build on top of it, and not just us, right? The beauty of this technology is that is basically JavaScript and HTML, right? So is React.js, React Native for mobile, and JavaScript mainly. So also the way we design it is that JavaScript is the most used programming language when it comes to, most used ever programming language. And you can find, so at this point, any web developer that they are the most easy to find in the world can build the centralized application, because we solve all the complexity of peer-to-peer discovery, peer-to-peer communication, and storage and everything for that through the Holepunch SDK. So suddenly every single developer can forget about the cost of infrastructure. You today would never build a Zoom competitor, because you would need, that even if you have the best user interface, you still have to pay massively for the backend infrastructure. It would cost hundreds of millions per year. But with Holepunch, all that cost goes away, right? So you can focus, and the entire Keet interface has been developed by one single front-end developer. Because in 6 months, right? Everything else is solved by Holepunch. That's why we are so excited, because it's like we are creating an even playing field for developers, right? We don't control anything, right? It will be open source, right? So other companies can build similar products, other products, and there is no way for us to control it or anyone to control it, because it's just pure talking to each other. It's just code.
Yeah. I mean, and you brought it up too, which I'm really interested to dive into, and please do not apologize for getting deep into the weeds. I'm extremely fascinated and interested to learn how this works at a technical level. And I mean, but you mentioned it, like you can with your Bitcoin, you can recover your data from your peers using a seed phrase. So there's some form of private public key cryptography involved here. Where does this come in? And so it's basically user authentication using keys, correctly?
Yes, it's basically we use private public keys in order to, you generate your root key, and we are adding now a sort of the ID scheme where you can have your root key, you have your key chain, so you can derive another like a sub key that is the key that you could use for chats. Then you can derive from the root key another key that you could use, for example, for storage, and so on and so forth. And the cool thing is that you can derive sub keys of the chat sub key, so like in a tree form. So you could have multiple identities for the chats if you want to have multiple identities, for example, all part of the same root key. So of course you can go down, but you cannot derive up. And so simple cryptography, right? So it's not we are reinventing the wheel. It's like simple derivation path cryptography that has been used for a long time in crypto. But that is actually cool because then it allows us to do like multi-device pairing. So you have your phone, your laptop. We can allow you to sync the two, and all in a peer-to-peer fashion. Right now you get, for example, you have for your chat derivation path, you can have two keys, and both of them can create an attestation to prove that they are part of the same, let's say, root key. And so that who is in the chat with you can unify your contacts under one single Marty contact, so that they don't see multiple Martys in the chat, right? So, but it's kind of standard technique, but we like simple things, right? So that because we can mold them into complex behaviors while remaining extremely simple in the implementation.
Yes. And then, so this gets to the whole key management UX quote unquote problem that many people point to at Bitcoin. People are like, Bitcoin's great, but at scale, nobody's going to want to hold their keys. What are your thoughts on individuals and the trend towards the security of an individual's keys becoming more common? Like, do you think it becomes more common? Do you think this notion that most people aren't going to control their keys is correct? How do you think this plays out moving forward?
I think that it's important to have easy backup schemes. So one of the errors is forcing everyone to be the most sophisticated user ever, right? So, for example, you could use a ledger, then you could use a ledger plus a multisig, or multisig with ledgers as hardware keys, and you could for your seed you could use like a metal capsule, and or you could use a paper, right? So there are so many, even with people being able to manage keys, there are so many levels of security, right? So it's an endless battle. So I like security. I use Cubes OS as my operating system, and of course multisig plus ledgers. But others might be happy just with a ledger with a paper sheet and so on, right? So you need to create if we want to onboard people from outside of the crypto industry, we need really to force the creation of user-friendly backup schemes where these backup schemes can be, and with the peer-to-peer technology is not that difficult, right? So you can imagine, like, for example, your private keys can be backed up from by 100 different peers. There are really a tiny fraction of data, right? So it's super simple, right? So, but you can have a way with a password or a 2FA to request that backup and start from scratch and get back all your data, right? So, but that the user experience, the user friendliness of that experience is something that we are heavily working on, both at Citizen. I know that John is a maniac on that part, and also with Holepunch.
Yeah, no, it's very exciting because, as we've been saying, like, this is desperately needed. One can make a very strong argument that this iteration of the internet over the last 25 years has been, or will be, looked back on as an anomaly where maybe we architected the infrastructure of the applications being built on top of the internet stack as unwise and not well thought out. But as we move forward through time and we get smarter and get more comfortable with private public key cryptography, we're devising schemes that make the internet more robust for the individual user. And Holepunch definitely seems to be a solution moving us towards that direction. So it's incredibly encouraging to see this, because again, it's desperately needed.
I completely cannot agree more.
Yeah. And going back to like, you're spinning up Holepunch as this protocol, and a lot of people historically, or last decade, when you spin up a protocol, everybody wants to throw a token on it and put it on the blockchain. I mean, I think that's one thing we should make clear. Holepunch is not a blockchain. It's just a different data structure with states that you can tap into. And then, but you don't need to add a token that's inherent to the protocol, but you can add sats to it. You can inject Bitcoin via the Lightning Network into this, right? Because I saw Keet, I believe it teased it out yesterday. You had Keet send a tweet out where somebody was sending sats to another individual via the messaging app. So how do you view Bitcoin playing into the Holepunch infrastructure, and how does that integrate with the system?
Yeah, so payment systems are extremely important, right? So it is, so we see the integration with Lightning as complementary, right? So companies can build services on top of Holepunch, and they might want to be paid for it, and that's completely fine, right? So I'm not saying that when I talk about tokens shouldn't be part of the protocols, is because protocols should exist without tokens, unless it's Bitcoin and that is money. But everything else, so all the communication protocols, all these interaction protocols should exist without the tokens. Then people should create use cases for these protocols, and then at that point you can create payment layers. So for example, you can integrate Holepunch, and let's say that you provide trading signals, right? So you can sell trading signals through Holepunch, and then you can say, I want to be paid some satoshis every minute, or every 10 minutes for my service. And then you just generate an invoice constantly, and then people can pay for that. And if people stop paying you, you stop servicing the data to them. So easy as that, right? So it's important for Holepunch to have payment primitives that are something that already exists, is robust like a network, and then can be integrated by software developers. So I'm really excited about that, because we prove that the blockchain is not a solution for everything, right? So I don't like all these 3 to 5 years we have been hearing all these blockchains saying, well, I can scale to gazillion transactions per second. I'm going to serve all the needs of humanity. The thing that so first of all, blockchains cannot scale to that, right? So full stop. So the only way to scale to the human needs is being like Bitcoin, 10 minutes block time, so that, worst case scenario, even in war zones, there is enough time to download one block. And everything else should be a layer 2 that is not sharing a global state. So what I don't like is layer 1s that trying to be as fast as they can to solve all the humanity needs. And one thing that people forget and tend to forget in our industry is that, yes, crypto is cool, but there are other industries that are growing fast. There is artificial intelligence, there is robotics, and there is Internet of Things. So if you unify the 30 things that I just said, you have robots, sentient robots, in the next 10 to 15 years. And then you have already fridges that are buying groceries for you if you are missing the milk, for example. We have light bulbs that are paying for their own electricity, at least prototypes. You have cars that are self-driving, and so on. Imagine how many robots will be in our life in 10 to 20 years. And so all these robots will do machine-to-machine payments, will do all the crazy things that we are doing, maybe. And so the amount of transactions we will need are much higher than any possible layer 1 solution will ever be able to offer. And there is no solution to that with global state, right? Because global state is 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 problematic because it requires to rely on the speed of light. Because with the speed of, if you have a global consensus with a global state, means that the majority of the nodes has to be informed about the change. If you have 400, 500 milliseconds block time, that is almost impossible, especially if you enter in a war zone, then connectivity might not be great. Then you start seeing all these blockchains falling apart because they cannot, the state cannot be reliably shared across, all the places in all the points of the earth. So that's why I think that is important to use blockchains only as a settlement layer for really important transactions. And Lightning Network, you have channels, people send money through channels, and then eventually, from time to time, this channel will be settled on chain. And so
Yes.
that's that's something that I like to bring also in Holepunch as an entire concept.
Yeah, I went up there to my bookshelf and I grabbed my 21 computer, which Balaji Srinivasan launched, I believe it was in 2015, 2016. But this was, the whole goal around this project was enabling the machine payable web, the machine-to-machine payable web. And it's funny to think back, like, yes, maybe Balaji and the team at 21Co had the right idea, but they were just a bit too early. You need something like Lightning that allows you to move these sats at light speed and have final settlement. This was doing it on chain. This is the weakest mining computer in the world. But that idea has been around for a while, and would you argue it wasn't until Lightning came to the Bitcoin stack that it could actually be enabled?
Exactly, right. So of course, innovation takes time. Again, we go back to the fact that we cannot pretend that Bitcoin is a complete technology and can fulfill all the needs of humanity in just a few years, right? So things will be all built on top of Bitcoin, and the most important thing is Lightning. So to me, it's obvious when I try to speak to non-technical persons like that I meet in my day-to-day life, why I'm excited about Bitcoin is like I try to point them to the fact that I'm not interested of what their fridge is going to buy for them, or what they are paying for, if they are paying for a salad or for a steak or whatever, right? So if you have a global share state on layer one, you will see all that information that I shouldn't care about. But with Lightning, is just channels, right? It's the same thing of Holepunch. You are actually opening a channel that is a socket, that is a connection, only with the person that you need to deal with in that specific moment in time, right? So you can send 1 trillion transactions we can send to each other trillions of transactions without affecting our neighbor, because our neighbor should never know about those transactions. But we shouldn't know about what our neighbor is doing as well, because that will be just clog our network, our computing power, our life in general, right? So it's the simplest of the concepts. Of course, Lightning took a little bit of time to be created. There are some, of course, security aspects that were needed, that was a need to be figured out, but the underlying concept is obvious. You need channels. You need to segregate information just within the people, the peers that need that information in that specific moment in time.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Bitfinex was the first exchange to integrate Lightning, correct?
We were the first big exchange to integrate Lightning, and now we are still the biggest node. We crossed, I think, 1,000 Bitcoin on Lightning, on our Lightning node now. So we are actually 1/5 of the network alone.
It's crazy.
Yes.
Well, with that,
but that is important, right? So sorry, well, I cut you off.
go ahead.
The reason why we grew so big is that we wanted to prove. So when we first decided to go with Lightning, we were sick and tired of all that narrative. Like, was 2019. There was the narrative that Lightning was not secure for big transactions. So what we did was, putting Lightning, installing Lightning, launching the node, and also opening with selected parties 5 Bitcoin channels. So we said, look, we are going to put up our money to show that this thing will work. and is in fact safe. We are running our node since years, never had a problem. You don't know how many problems we have in running all the other blockchain nodes, but never had a problem with Lightning. Of course, we have watchtowers and so on, but it's part of, it was a learning curve for us, but also proof that Lightning was in fact safe and ready for scale.
Yeah, and well, I'm very happy to be talking to you right now because you've been experimenting with it at scale for years. How has the Lightning Network progressed since you guys first spun up your node and started running it in 2019? What is the Lightning Network in 2022 compared to what it was when you first started interacting with it?
Well, at Bitfinex, we are processing tens of thousands of transactions per month on Lightning Network. Also, we have created with Bitrefill the settlement mechanism so that our users that have BTC balance can actually buy gift cards directly from Bitrefill, paying in sats. So that interaction is like, blazing fast is doesn't require like deferred settlements between us and Bitrefill. So that use case is, by the way, is growing by the month, right? Bitrefill usage is going through the roof. They are great team, great guys, great product. I mean, I think is one of the most wonderful products that we have that was conceived in our industry. And we have been experimenting a lot, Lightning channels together. John Carvalho actually came to us from Bitrefill. As you know, he's a big advocate also of Lightning, right? So we have been discussing and growing our Lightning use case together. So John, he's now with Sinon, is creating this way to buy and sell channels. And so Bitfinex will integrate that part into its product suite so that people can actually buy channels directly through their Bitfinex interface. So we are adding all these use cases because we feel like there is a lot of education still needed, and people need to understand that Lightning Network is not scary, but can be used like really simply in their day-to-day lives. So we are seeing more and more wallets integrating with Lightning. Of course, there is El Salvador. El Salvador kind of help a lot there because now we are seeing there was this force request to the big corporates like McDonald's and Starbucks in El Salvador to have to support Lightning payments. So in a way, even that proved that even big corporates that can move fast and can actually adapt really quickly to technology. So there is so much to do and so much to talk about, but Lightning completely changed since the first time we started supporting it in Bitfinex.
Yeah, I mean, I use Lightning every day. I mean, there will be people streaming us sats over the Lightning Network as they listen to the show.
And I'm not sure if you know that, but we in Lugano, part of the Plan B movement, merchants will start accepting in the next days. Actually, today we had the first test run. So they have a point of sale, a POS, that is Lightning enabled. So now they can receive payments directly to their cashier directly via Lightning. And there is the plan to deliver 1,000 of these point of sales in the next 2 months.
And then we get to the chicken and the egg problem. Like, how do we get people spending at these merchants?
Well, I think that, as a Bitcoiner that I hold Bitcoin, I prefer to keep in Bitcoin and then spend part of the Bitcoins that only when I need to, rather than have to, try to balance my cash accounts and so on. So, and also, there is the difference between El Salvador and Lugano, right, is quite big. Lugano is in Switzerland, is a rich city, and Lugano can still use Bitcoin as a way to attract Bitcoiners that are, there is a category of Bitcoiners that are wealthy people that could actually spend in Bitcoin because they have Bitcoins and they want to feel the experience. And Bitcoin and Tether are supported, right? So there is a lot of liquidity in both of those currencies. And that is a way we want in Lugano to prove that who is starting to support Bitcoin is going to attract a new wave of customers that want to spend directly in Bitcoin, and that could bring additional revenues to the city and to the merchants. And in El Salvador, instead, is different, right? So Bitcoin is a lifeline for people. So we see that. So in a way, it's beautiful to see how two different countries and cities from two different wealth that have two different wealth standards are using the same technology for different purposes.
Yeah. No, it's crazy how it feels like it's happening. I mean, there's a lot of people. I mean, I tweet this out pretty often. I think many people out there are sleeping on the Lightning Network. It still blows my mind that, particularly over here in the United States, all the big funds that are getting in the space, like, oh, we're going Solana, we're going NFTs, we're doing all this crypto stuff, but it's like, oh, you guys are missing the actual signal, which is the build out of the Lightning Network and its maturity, which seems to be hitting a breakaway speed at this point. The amount of companies that I'm coming across that are building products using the Lightning Network, what you guys are doing at Holepunch and Keet and Bitfinex to integrate it. I think there is a lot of people around the world that are sleeping on what's happening on the Bitcoin stack.
Completely agreed. Yeah.
Well, you're at a conference. I'm sure you've got dinners, you got people to meet up with. I don't want to take up too much of your time. Paolo, it's been great getting to sit down and speak with you. I've been, as I mentioned, an observer of the products that you've been building for many years now. And Matt and I always call Bitfinex like the pirate ship of the industry, and it's always great to see you guys just evading the people that want to bring you down, and just delivering value and just proving like, hey, we're here because we like Bitcoin, because we think it's an imperative for the future for humanity. And like you said in the beginning, you guys have just been head down building for many years now, and I'm very happy to see that you guys are making an effort to be more public facing these days, because I think people need to hear exactly what you guys are doing, because you guys are on the cutting edge of everything that's going on in Bitcoin and distributed systems.
I really do appreciate that. And thank you very much, Marty, for having me. It has been a real pleasure.
Pleasure was all mine. Is there anything on top of your mind that you want to leave the freaks with before we wrap up here?
Just give a try to Keet and you won't be looted.
You go to keet.io, keet.io. Very easy domain name to remember. Yeah, I've tested it. It works beautifully. So go check it out. Paolo, go enjoy your night in Paris. Thank you again. Hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Absolutely. Anytime. Thanks, man. Have a good day.
All right. Peace and love, freaks. Take care.